All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here tonight and have a chance to interact and engage and talk about some hot topics and important topics. Whitman and Wooster were excited to collaborate and be able to share a little bit more about our practices surrounding financial transparency and how we work with our families through this important process. So thank you for joining us. Just some quick housekeeping items. I wanted to let you know that we did get several requests to record the session tonight. So we are recording. And we did choose deliberately to use the meeting format versus the webinar. We wanted to make sure that there was a chance to see one another and to ask questions live if you'd like once we have time for Q&A. But you're also welcome to use the chat function throughout. I know that some folks like to use it just to say hello and introduce yourselves and share where you're coming from tonight, or what organization or school that you're connected with. But also you can use that for questions as well as we talk today. So thanks for that. So my name is Jen Winge, and I'm the Dean of Admissions at the College of Wooster. This is my 10th year working at the College of Wooster, and before that, most of my professional tenure was at another Colleges That Change Lives school at Allegheny College in Pennsylvania. I also do have some experience on the other side with being a director of college counseling and instructor in English at a private school outside of Pittsburgh. So I have a little bit of that experience, but certainly most of my time has been here in admissions, collaborating with all of you. And I'm really excited to collaborate with our friends at Whitman. So Adam, please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jen. I'm Adam Miller, Director of Admission here at Whitman. This is my 8th year at Whitman. I moved up here from Southern California and previously worked for 6 years at Claremont McKenna College. And prior to that, a couple years at the University of Redlands. And so, yeah, I've really enjoyed just everything about being at Whitman, and especially the opportunity to collaborate with awesome colleagues like Jen and folks at Wooster and just Colleges That Change Lives in general. This has been a happy opportunity for us to connect, and we're excited to share more about the things that we're trying to do to help you and your students. Some of the idea for this came from a recent article in the New York Times in the money section, and the journalist Ron Lieber had been talking to a lot of different colleges and happily decided at the end that Whitman and Wooster were the two that he really felt like were setting a trend and that he wanted to highlight. And that prompted us to exchange a few emails and think about maybe what we could do to get the word out a little bit more. And it's funny because it took this article for us to collaborate more intentionally. We have a long history of exchange of faculty and provosts and competing in sporting events and all of these things. But it's really the first time we've done anything formally together. And this is the very first event we've done. So I hope you all enjoy this, and we will welcome any feedback that you have on kind of this as a format for learning more about some pretty cool programs that we offer. So we will start just for those of you, I don't want to presume that any of you all are super familiar with Whitman. And so just a few quick words of overview. We're in Washington State, the southeast corner of Washington State, which does have a pretty different climate than Seattle or Portland, for those of you who might have certain associations with the Northwest. So we're a warmer, drier climate, more kind of agricultural, really awesome town that we're located in. And we have regular information sessions, and you can sign up for those. And I would love to tell you all sorts of things about Whitman. And if you end up being in the Northwest, we love hosting counselors. Some of you I have seen here in Walla Walla before. Whitman's campus has grown increasingly diverse in recent years. We, in particular, have grown to have a pretty big national footprint. And even for students from the Northwest, Whitman is about 200 miles away. So for pretty much everybody who comes to Whitman is pretty far from home, and that's a real unifying factor for our student body. We are a place that does small and personal really well. You would expect that out of a college that changes lives. And then a couple of things that are worth highlighting is that our admission process has been test optional for several years now, and we are not thrown off at all by the testing struggles that folks are having right now. And we're really proud of a couple things in particular. Very high graduation rates that span the spectrum from first generation students, international students, students of color, and some of the lowest debt at the time of graduation of any college, certainly in the Northwest and nationwide as well. And so that financial commitment has been in place for a long time for Whitman, and we're taking a new spin on this, just as Wooster is. So I'll pass it back to you, Jen.
Thanks. Yeah, so we'll head east to Ohio. The College of Wooster is located in the wonderfully vibrant small city of Wooster, Ohio. So as you can see, we're a town of about 30,000 residents, and we're conveniently located just about an hour south of Cleveland, 90 minutes north of the state capital of Columbus, and just about a half an hour from Akron, Canton. So 3 great airports to get to us if you're not driving into Ohio or nearby. Students really love, and families are typically surprised by the vibrancy of our town. I know that liberal arts colleges tend to be nestled sometimes in some more remote areas. And so, yes, you're going to have to pass a couple cornfields to get to Wooster, but once you're here, I think folks are pleasantly surprised by just the overall economy and the vibrancy of our downtown, as well as the amenities that students hope to have, like Chipotle and Panera and other things. But we're most proud, and of course, we most celebrate the diversity of our students. So, like Whitman, we are very dedicated to making sure that students are interacting with those that have very different perspectives, identities, and backgrounds. We know that that's really part of becoming a global citizen and being prepared, with those 21st century skills. And so note that we're very intentional with how we recruit and where we recruit. And so knowing that we have 65 countries represented in our 2,000 students, and we have nearly a quarter of our students as US students of color. And we're recognized as the 19th most internationalized campus for liberal arts colleges in the country. So we're very proud of that. I think that Wooster is best known for how we do research and how we approach that as part of our curricular experience for students. So you may have if you know Wooster, you probably heard of the independent study or this senior capstone experience that we've been recognized with US News and Niche and this guide and others. Know that we do teaching best, but also provide every student, not just certain disciplines or honors programs, but every student that comes to Wooster will graduate with that senior capstone full year-long experience. One thing I just wanted to note that's new for those of you that are very familiar with Wooster and you're wondering what's happening and what's new. I know many schools are dealing with some financial distress. And so you're hearing about programs changing or being eliminated altogether, whereas I'm really proud that Wooster is a fiscally sound a place to be able to grow programs. So we just had our faculty vote on and approve what we call our Wooster Pathways program. So outside of the major and minor and outside of this required senior research, students have the option to take an interdisciplinary approach to exploring different careers. So it's usually a collection of 2 to 4 different classes that are interdisciplinary in focus, but it's guaranteed internships, study abroad, work experience, whether here in the region or outside of the region, for students to explore different careers starting as early as their first semester. So something new and different that we know is important to our families moving forward. So let's get to what we're here to talk about, and that of course is financial aid and understanding the importance of being transparent and honest with our families and helping them, helping to reduce the anxiety that goes around the idea of affording colleges like Whitman and Wooster. So I thought I would just share a little bit of history. So tonight, we're specifically going to focus on what Ron talked about in the article, but I remember specifically talking with him during his visit to campus. He came to watch our symposium, our research symposium, and got to interact with a lot of students, but I specifically remember his face and his reaction when we were talking about the early aid estimator. It was just sort of a surprise to him. And I said, well, this is different than a net price calculator. This is very customized to Wooster, very customized to our families. It's not an aggregate or application or software that just spits out a total. These are human beings sitting down and providing this opportunity for students to really understand the net cost of attending Wooster long before they choose to even apply or even before completing the FAFSA. And so when I arrived to Worcester, I actually brought the early aid estimator with me from Allegheny. It was something that we did years before the net price calculator was even required on college websites. And so we knew that it was going to be a tool that would be successful here, especially in this really crowded marketplace in Ohio and in the Midwest. And so as you can see, we've grown significantly in the number of submissions. In our first year, we had a little over 430 students take advantage of it. And last year we ended nearly double that. So it's been obviously well received, and students are finding that it's a really effective tool for us. Our particular early aid estimator, we've actually sort of shifted our time frame. Originally, we had opened up in mid-August and had gone through early December with the tool. But I think because of how the FAFSA moved into October, but also our families were eager and anxious to hear sooner. Particularly, I found that our coaches were getting a lot of angst from families wanting to hear an early read and understanding things even in the end of their junior year. But also we just know families want to know as earlier than ever before. So we moved our timeline up where the early estimator is active and available on our website from mid-June. And so we now ended around the first week of November for our students. And we did, designate this just for seniors. We did that because it's really helpful to have those first 3 years of classes and grades and looking at that trajectory and growth of a student through their junior year to help with the merit assessment. But to be completely honest, it's also human resources because our staff as well as financial aid staff are taking the time to do this customized estimate. It takes time. And so we needed to, provide a little bit more focus to just the seniors that were going through the process. Worcester's online form, you're welcome to go to it now if you'd like, but we'll share a little bit more about that later, but know that we have 2 sections. We have a merit-based section that is required to actually submit it. So it's looking at the student's overall background and academic success. But then if they would like, there's a need-based section that's customized to Worcester that is not required, is it's totally optional. So many families just choose to send in the merit-based. They're not ready or maybe not concerned about the need-based aid, but know that that is available and that is customized to Worcester. So students can complete that need-based section without the FAFSA. What we love about this tool, comparatively to some net price calculators, I know there are lots of different versions of NPCs out there now, but we know that the federal pool that some schools use is using old data, right, and old aggregate data and old policies. And so I love that our customized tool can have the most updated scholarship amounts and our most updated financial aid policies that we're using for that current population of students and what they would receive when they would come. And it's been successful. We feel that, seeing nearly 3/4 of the submissions ending up as applications, so students are satisfied with that result, so they end up applying. And the yield is slightly higher than our overall yield in terms of those that ultimately get into the class. I do love the steps that we take after a student receives their results. We make sure that we do send an email out to both the student and the parent to invite them to have a conversation. And so that's happening right now in a lot of ways. Our students our staff are having virtual conversations with our families and students about those results. How we approach merit assessment, I thought we would start there. This is actually an example of one of our peer institutions of what's on their website. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, that there are a lot of schools out there that will just put it out there that if you have a certain GPA, maybe a certain test score or a class rank, this is exactly the kind of scholarship that you'll receive. So I do appreciate the transparency of this approach, but I do think it's important to know that this isn't how Worcester approaches a merit assessment. We actually go a few steps further than that. So I think it's important that when we do receive the early aid estimator, and of course, when we review applications, it truly is a holistic process where we provide weight and give weight to a variety of attributes within that estimator and within the application. But here on the estimator, this is what we're collecting from students in the merit aid assessment. And as you can see, we do not ask or require for the test score as part of that. We actually had planned to go test optional prior to the pandemic, and we were excited to share that news. We actually had Wooster students do the validity study, so it was very apropos for Wooster. And then the pandemic hit. So it wasn't news anymore because everybody was going test optional. But really that was our goal, was to take that out of the equation for merit assessment, but give students an option to send their tests if they wanted that to be part of the admission evaluation. But here for the early estimator, these are the things that we're asking the student to complete. And as you can see, we're really looking at that trajectory of grades, of rigor. In fact, rigor is probably weighs the heaviest in our rubric and how we evaluate. So looking within the context of the school, how the student is growing and challenging themselves. And then also we do look at that engagement, whether it's outside of school, in the home, or of course in the school with different engagement and activities. I thought I'd share just a couple quick examples. So this is a really typical profile for a student that is looking at Wooster and ultimately enrolls. So here is your typical A to B student coming from the top 20% of their class, if we do have class rank available. Maybe not taking the most demanding, not an AP capstone student or an IB diploma student, but certainly applying themselves and challenging themselves in a couple different areas, attending a very competitive school where 3/4 of the students are going on to a four-year institution, and then of course having solid enrollment. This would result in what is our merit scholarship program, which is the Dean's Scholarship of $35,000, and that is an annual guaranteed scholarship for up to 8 semesters. So that would be the result that they receive in a letter that explains to them that that is guaranteed. And then we do encourage students to consider still filing the FAFSA once they decide to apply to Wooster as well. Then if the student decided to complete the need-based assessment, we obviously have our financial aid staff take over. And in most cases, we don't have a FAFSA yet, not until this time of year. So in August, when they receive that need-based assessment, these are the items that we're collecting. So think of the FAFSA and can condense it to about 14 to 16 questions and data points. And that's what we're asking for family members to help to complete when they complete the estimator. So not anything I think that's new to all of you in your conversation, but looking at that adjusted gross income, looking at taxes paid. We know that assets can really vary in terms of how families report it, but looking at that, of course, student contributions and the number in the household that are going to college. So here's one example. I think a common type of example for Wooster, where you have a household income of about 100,000, assets at 50,000, some student contributions. And so this is how this would result. So we would calculate, our financial aid staff would calculate an EFC of 17,000. And looking at a cost of attendance, so that of course not only includes the comprehensive fee of Wooster, but also books, supplies, expenses. When you subtract that EFC of 17,000, this particular family with $100,000 income would have a need of $53,000. So this is how Wooster would provide that estimate. We would start with that Dean's Scholarship with that particular student. We would add in then any Wooster institutional grant, obviously, to support that student through that need-based grant. And then we are a school that builds in the minimum direct loan amounts, as well as opportunities for work study. So as you can see, we're close to meeting full need for this particular student. In fact, on average, we meet about 93% of need for our students. So we're not a school that can say that we meet full need for everyone, but we're so close. And so this is a good example of that, where perhaps, when we're counseling and talking with the family, we talk about summer employment and other opportunities for the student to earn that additional money to meet that need through summer earnings. When you increase the parent income, it's really interesting to see how that EFC can really nearly double. But this gives you an idea of when you see a slight increase in assets, but also that income. This is also a pretty common EFC that we'll see for Wooster families. you'll see a need then of $37,000. So if we still maintain that that student is eligible for a dean scholarship, in this particular case, we're essentially meeting need, if not exceeding need, if that student decides to take that unsubsidized loan. So this is kind of an interesting way that we know that even families with 150,000 AGI, many of them are going to sit here and say, "Are you really think I can pay out of pocket $33,000?" So we're doing all that we can through our merit strategy to support those families that we know need that additional aid to make it affordable and accessible. So just some reminders and to provide just a little bit more context around those packages and those examples. Our comprehensive fee currently is $66,750. We normally see a tuition increase anywhere between 2 and 4%. So that's what we're anticipating for this year. And so it's important to know that we do have over 80% of our students receiving aid. This is our average aid package for students that did submit the FAFSA this year. So it gives you an idea of that discount overall. And then of course, our commitment to access with our Pell Grant recipients, knowing that about 20% of our full population are Pell.
Your phone, Gloria.
So just wrapping up here, and I'm going to turn things over to Adam. Just some reminders. This is where you can find the Wooster Early Aid Estimator, and it still obviously is open for another week or so, and we're going to probably extend that until the 8th of November. So if you're working with families now, feel free to send them our way. Those that submitted their FAFSA to Wooster, we actually send them a pre-filled early aid estimator and tell them like, hey, you don't need to do the need-based section. We have everything we need. So here's the easy merit-based section that you can finish for us, and we can provide that estimate if you feel that you need that. And I know we're in a really unusual year, and we may have to talk about that a little bit more here at the end about how things are different this year. Know that this is probably something that maybe differs between Whitman and Wooster. Is with our estimator, we provide a text box for students to share special circumstances and changes based on the data that they've shared with us. But in the estimate phase, we're not taking in special circumstances to the point where we're doing professional development and changes in the EFC and the aid. So we remind and counsel families that that'll come later. Let's have you submit the FAFSA, decide what additional paperwork we may need to help you with that, to work with you in the next steps. So I'm going to turn things over to Adam at this point. So I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen so he can start sharing his.
All right, thank you, Jen. Let's go ahead and get screen share going here. Okay, everybody can see my screen, I hope. I have the chat up, so if it's not up there, thank you for the thumbs up, Jen. Please let me know. Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about how Whitman's process looks, and you'll see some differences and some similarities to Wooster's. We started ours just last year, and the background there is we had been doing a lot of analysis of the biggest pain points for families, and no surprise, finances is one of the biggest ones, and just the reality that getting the financial aid package at the very end put families in a really difficult situation. In particular, as we were working with families that were considering early decision, more and more wanted to be able to know what they were committing to. And that seemed like an eminently reasonable thing for families to want. And when the early FAFSA came into play, we realized that there was really nothing holding us back from being able to move the financial aid part of the process up to the start. We have a very, very consistent way that we approach need-based aid. Gapping is very, very minimal at Whitman and doesn't change throughout the course of the process. We don't use demonstrated interest in any way to influence our packages. And so we realized that that consistency of approach made it easy enough for us to do financial aid packages earlier. And frankly, our volume is not tremendous. We're a relatively small college, and we're a bit off the beaten path. So we do have 5,000 applicants, but we didn't anticipate that the volume of requests early would be so much that it would be a challenge for us. So last year we did kind of a quiet launch, had 101 requests. Our goal was to be 100% accurate and essentially give somebody a comprehensive financial aid package before they even applied. You can see the results there. We had 85 people out of 101 who did end up applying. 28 of them enrolled, and that is like 3 times as high as our general yield would be. Many of those decided to do early decision, which was a happy outcome for us and for them. So yeah, we felt really encouraged, and we started to be a little bit more aggressive with our messaging on that this year. We've already gotten now close to 200 requests in this current cycle. So just to kind of move to a couple slides, just to visually see what we're doing. We still have that net price calculator in place. That is still the best way that families can find out about potential cost at Whitman far in advance. But as you can see, in the old days, our application and financial aid deadline wasn't until January 15th. You wouldn't hear from us until early March. And so that May 1st deadline was always looming and created a pretty tough situation. Now we make our early financial aid guarantee program available starting August 1st. Before August 1st, we still invite families to use the net price calculator. Between August 1st and October 1st, we only do merit scholarship guarantees. So a family can fill out the form. Even if they would like to be considered for need-based aid, we just kind of hold that piece of information, but we'll go ahead and process their merit scholarship in August or September and send them that information. And then in October, we prompt them to submit the FAFSA, and then Whitman also uses the CSS profile. And so we prompt families to submit those 2 forms, and then within 2 weeks, we'll turn around now a full financial aid package that includes not just their merit scholarship, but also the need-based financial aid that they qualify for. And getting all of that stuff in place prior to the application deadlines. January 15th is our regular decision deadline. November 15th is our early decision 1 deadline. Has, I think, really been a welcome thing for so many of the families that we work with. The process is, and I'm going to kind of just walk you through that in just a second here. It's a really quick, short online form. We do get back to families within a couple weeks. And the way that we provide the information is through a secure online portal that's actually very similar to the portal they'll use if they've applied to Whitman. So it kind of gets them familiar with that area. They can access the letter, print it out if they'd like to. And it works pretty smoothly. So one of the things that's great about the world of quarantine, of Zoom, of COVID is we get to learn new things. So I tried a screen capture of video for the first time to see how long it would take me to go from whitman.edu to a submitted early financial aid request. And let's see if this shows up for you as I go here. So click play. All right, so we're on whitman.edu. You go to admission and aid, click on the early financial aid guarantee link, scroll down past the explanatory text. You indicate that you're in your final year of high school, that you're applying for need-based aid, that you've submitted the required financial aid forms. That would, of course, take more than 30 seconds to do. Might take longer to find your birth date, too, if you don't just enter 2020. Upload a copy of your transcript. Enter in your senior year course schedule. And see if you want to add any other courses. Let us know if you want to submit test scores. You don't have to. We are test optional. And there you go. You've submitted your early financial aid request. Wasn't that easy? So no reason to delay there. Here on the screen, you can see a sample of what we would provide to a family or to a student who has submitted the request. You can see it looks, if any of you have seen our financial aid packages, it's the exact same format. We have line items that show the achievement scholarship, which is what we would call a merit scholarship, the need-based scholarship, if you qualify for the Pell Grant or for a state need grant here in Washington State, any of the loans that you qualify for, as well as work study. We put the full cost of attendance up on the estimate, and then we try to address some of the frequent questions, right? You do still need to apply for admission. This is by no means a guarantee of an offer of admission. We talk about whether it's guaranteed for 4 years. The merit scholarship is, but of course, for need-based aid, they would need to reapply in future years. And we really do invite further questions. Jen kind of referenced this. One thing that's maybe a little bit different about Whitman's approach is that we do apply professional judgment at this phase of the process. We're really hoping to go as deep into the actual reality of what we're going to offer on the front end. We don't really have an appeals process or anything like that for these awards. So we try to do everything we can to take students' personal circumstances into account during the early financial aid guarantee. And then we do invite families to reach out to us so that we can start working together earlier rather than later. And then kind of like with Wooster, here are some of the general details about Whitman. I've referenced earlier that we have fairly limited gapping at Whitman, and so no family ever would have a gap of more than 4,000, and most have significantly less than that. Our merit scholarships are relatively modest in the grand scheme of colleges and universities out there. So our merit scholarship maximum is 25,000, and that's because the vast majority of our financial aid is earmarked for need-based aid, and so that's part of, I think, why we have really oriented our program around post October 1st, wanting to get families to get those forms in and have us give them as full a picture of exactly what their financial aid will look like if they decide to apply. And so this kind of concludes us talking about our programs, but we want to just share a few thoughts on how you might be able to use this and kind of use this as a transition to the questions that you all have. So we've jotted down a few ideas here. Jen, this ends the part where we had coordinated who was going to talk about what. Do you want to chat about? I think maybe you're going to take the first couple, and then I was going to jump in after that. Sure. Is that right? Okay. Sure.
No, I'm happy to take the first couple. Sure. So yeah, we brainstormed. We just thought, how can you explain this, the benefits of this process, or just provide a little bit more context to the families, especially those that are anxious about this. So obviously, when you have this opportunity to do an early estimate, we know that it's going to help people feel a little bit more comfortable with the terminology and the process. Just as we know, it can create a lot of anxiety and folks not understanding. So it provides some introduction to that terminology, but also it makes them think about what they need to gather, the 2019 tax data. And on Wooster's site, we actually do have a worksheet for families that before they sit down and do the early aid estimator, we give them some tips of what to gather. So just helping them understand what they're going to need to do when they actually do have to complete the FAFSA and continue to do that from year to year. And then, one of the biggest things that we wanted to make sure that we wanted to make sure folks knew about Whitman and Wooster is we know that there are a lot of folks out there that feel like private colleges are just too expensive and they're not even putting us on the list. And so we do appreciate you as all very good partners that you help them understand that that's not necessarily the case. So this is also just a wonderful way for you to reinforce that by providing them the estimator link and to give them that early look at the aid so they understand that it can be very doable and very manageable. Off to you, Adam.
Yeah, and as we're talking about kind of the similarities of our programs and how it could be helpful, we're realizing that Whitman and Wooster, I think, fit somewhere near the middle of colleges and universities in terms of how we approach financial aid, right? We're not schools that just completely ignore merit aid, right? We're not schools that automatically meet full need with no loans. We do a little bit of gapping, but not a ton of gapping. And I think what it does is, for students that maybe just aren't sure what colleges will think of their situations, I'm sure our formulas for calculating need are a little bit different because every college varies, but I'd say we're probably a good proxy for a lot of the other types of colleges your students might be looking at. And so while, of course, we would hope that students who are doing these programs are at least interested in our colleges, there's no expectation from either of us that students will absolutely apply if they go through our processes. And I think this can be a good counseling tool for students just to get a sense of what they might be able to expect down the road, and for families to begin to plan a little bit more in terms of what is a realistic expectation for how private colleges might package them. The other thing is, I think for a lot of students, they're just curious about what merit aid might look like, and again, we have some different approaches. Worcester's merit aid packages, frankly, are going to be more competitive than Whitman's. I think that's a really helpful piece of information for students to be able to find out earlier. And similarly, because Whitman doesn't really offer as much in the way of merit, for schools like Whitman that are maybe a little stingier on the merit side of things, it can be a good signal to students about whether they should hope for getting a merit scholarship at a place like Whitman. So I think that's a nice way to be able to test the waters a little bit. And then, a clear thing is that for students considering early applications, the peace of mind that can come with actually knowing exactly what to expect at the end of the process is huge. And I'd be lying if I said that one of the reasons we decided to do this wasn't to increase early decision. Early decision helps us out a lot, especially in times of uncertainty at Whitman, but we don't want to do that in a way that excludes students who do feel anxious about finances. And so it was awesome last year to be able to see that so many of the students that were qualifying for Pell Grants and for large financial aid packages now felt confident applying ED to Whitman, and families were just delighted with that. So those all are, we think of some of the big benefits that you might be able to realize as you work with students.
Great. Well, we wanted to make sure that we provided time for questions. We have a couple that we can start with in the chat. And Adam, since you were on the topic, there is a question from Rick. How do you determine the merit award, and what is your average merit award at Whitman?
Yeah, so our average merit award on the common data set is just south of 13,000. I'm guessing that'll bump up a little bit this year. We recognize that we're going to need to be a little more aggressive in that area. So I'm going to say it's probably more like 14 or 15,000 for this year. Our merit scholarship determination is quite holistic in the normal admission process. For the early financial aid guarantee, because we do have a streamlined form, it's going to be based essentially entirely on the student's transcript and the rigor of their curriculum. And so what we'll do is actually kind of create a baseline merit award. It is technically possible that upon further review in an actual application, we might bump that up based on some of the additional holistic factors that are considered. But what we're going to do is kind of lock in a minimum merit scholarship amount through the early financial aid guarantee process. And that's part of what our admission counselors do after these have been released, is they'll call families, do follow up, talk through the process. If they, are concerned that maybe, we underestimated the strength of their application, we'll engage in that conversation. We do take test scores into account, but the way we do it is that essentially it can only increase the merit scholarship award, and that only happens for students that have testing that's basically in the top decile of Whitman's applicant pool, which last year was a 34 or higher on the ACT, or 1450 or higher on the SAT. So it doesn't play into very many cases, but for students who have exceptionally strong testing, they might get a bump up in their award, but lower testing doesn't play into our process at all.
That's helpful, thanks. We also have a question. Has this process reduced the requests to negotiate financial aid packages? And how has this impacted the interactions then with your financial aid advisors, with families, and or with the admissions office? So I will say that it has, similarly to Whitman, we have seen many of those students that do the estimator choose to go early decision. So those students are not negotiating, right? Like once they have an idea and they've committed, that's been great. I'll just be honest with you. We continue to see a rise in negotiations and reviews each year. I would say a percentage of those are those that do the estimators, but the majority are not. The majority are students that didn't choose to go through that process and are at that stage, obviously in late winter, early spring of wanting to review and or appeal with other packages or new and different circumstances. But I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, we don't have to worry about that process anymore. I think that's just reality for us now. We obviously are as transparent as we can through that process, right? Through the review process. That's a whole other Zoom meeting, and we can certainly talk about it. And I do think, as I shared earlier, the estimator has just provided earlier, more accurate, and more informed conversations between the families with our staff. I think that it's provided an opportunity for our admissions staff to feel more comfortable talking about aid and working through that estimator before even a FAFSA arrives, but certainly has helped all of the staff members, both financial aid and admissions, to work with them. So I think families feel more comfortable asking questions earlier in the process because of that too.
I'll just add a couple of quick things on Whitman's side. Our program only had 100 requests last year, and so we saw very few of those folks come back and request to negotiate or appeal the awards. I suspect that may change this year, and as that program grows. The one thing I did, I think, anticipate and became reality is that we did have families that got the early financial aid guarantee and then were applying early action to other colleges or rolling to other colleges. And so they felt great about the package until they got, a merit award from another college that was more generous. And then they would come back and ask if there was anything more we could do. We took a pretty hard line last year. Again, this is going to be a tricky year. So I am not going to commit to anything in terms of how we're going to handle those types of situations in this year. But it was really nice. Being able to, among other things, our financial aid office reached out to a lot of families proactively as they were doing the financial aid awards, because with only 100 of them in October, they had the capacity to do so. I think a lot of families responded really positively to the notion that, Whitman's, thinking about me as an individual. They want to know more about, this note that I put onto the CSS profile. And so I think that actually helped us avoid some of the conversations that might have happened later.
Great. Those were all the questions in the chat that I can see. So I just want to give everyone a moment that if you do have any additional questions, we can also unmute. Oh, I think we have another one. So what are your requirements for students to retain the merit scholarship in terms of GPA, et cetera, each year once in college? So Adam, why don't you go first with that?
Yeah, Whitman doesn't have any stipulation other than the student be enrolled full-time. And so if you're in good academic standing, you're still enrolled full-time. You retain your merit scholarship even if you happen to be placed on academic probation for a semester, which would happen at Whitman if a GPA drops below 2.0. But we still let students retain their merit scholarships in those circumstances.
Ditto. So same for Wooster. We do have some additional scholarships available that are participatory. So we have performance-based scholarships in music, theater, and dance, as well as Model UN. So if you have any students that love Model UN, we have a great program. So those do require a certain level of participation to retain those based on the semester. But that Dean's scholarship that I provided in the examples, that is guaranteed similarly to Whitman. Okay, so next question. Are international students eligible for the same scholarships as domestic students? Go ahead, Adam.
Okay, sure, I'll jump in. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer for Whitman is that Whitman meets the full demonstrated need of all international students that are admitted. And so the scholarships just look different. We don't package with loans or with work study. And so a student with the same EFC as a domestic student would actually get a larger international scholarship from Whitman. But international students are considered for merit scholarships the same way. And so in most ways, it's the same process. It's just that we do a different calculation. It's also worth mentioning that Whitman uses our own financial aid form for international students that looks a little different than like the ISFA or the CSS profile. It's streamlined. We tried to make it a better reflection of the realities that international students face. And I'd be happy to chat more about that with anybody if you'd be interested in learning more about how we go about determining what type of scholarship an international student qualifies for on the need-based side of things.
Great. And at Wooster, we do provide both need-based and merit-based opportunities for international students. The estimator is not available to them, though. I think that's a good distinction just to know that. We do use the College Board form to obtain some of that additional financial aid information if a student is interested in knowing what their need-based eligibility would be as an international student. But yes, the amounts for international students varies greatly depending on that need and that merit, but very similarly, policy and packaging and review process as we do for US students. But, you know, we typically, with international students, our sort of guideline is we look for students to be able to commit and contribute about half of tuition. And then we work with that family to try to meet that need above and beyond that. So that's typically where our guideline is. We always can break the rules, so sometimes we break that rule, but that's usually the guideline if you're working with international students. If the tuition rises, I'm sorry, Adam, were you going to add something?
No, I was going to, pose the next question to you since you've been doing the hard work.
Oh, okay. So the next question is about the tuition increase that I mentioned earlier. Is that if the tuition rises 2 to 4% each year, does the merit scholarship go up as well? It's a great question. Families do ask that often. At Wooster, our merit scholarships, once you receive that, you retain that for those 8 semesters, but it is a static amount. It will not go up. So in many ways, you can see that as, that's guaranteed money that you have no matter what your performance is at Wooster, just so you maintain that 2.0, but also what financial changes you may see as a family. So it's the need-based aid that will change or be flexible based on increases, as well as, if your financial situation as a family changes. So we do look to increase institutional grant aid on an annual basis based on that increase in tuition. So we really are trying to make sure that we're retaining students and keeping them here with better financial aid packages each year, but it really does depend on the individual.
Exactly the same for Whitman.
Next question, do you take interviews into consideration for merit aid? How about Whitman?
Yeah, so this gets back to the answer I gave earlier regarding how Whitman does merit scholarships. So for our early financial aid guarantee program, the answer would be no. For our overall application review, we do have personal qualities that factor into the overall evaluation. So interviews could come into play at that phase. I would say it's probably fairly rare, to be honest, that's actually a deciding factor in terms of merit scholarships. The other thing I'll say on that is that we do have a couple special scholarships, something called the Garrett Sherwood, which is a leadership scholarship, and a couple others that do have maybe a little more weight put on personal characteristics and that might be gleaned more easily from an interview. So I won't say that interviews don't ever come into play, but again, pretty rare.
Yeah. At Wooster, the interview is not required for admission. It is required for our top merit scholarship. It is called the College Scholar Award. So that would replace the Dean Scholarship if students decide to apply and are offered that. That is up to $38,000 a year. And so we do require it for that additional or that competitive scholarship. But for the general process that we reviewed tonight, the interview will not play a role in that. We don't expect students to interview. We do encourage it at every point because it does provide that additional context when it comes to understanding their engagement in and out of the classroom and those activities that is part of our review process. And one last question, I believe we have, are these options available to transfer students as well? It's a great question.
At Whitman, the answer is yes. Transfer students are welcome to pursue the early financial aid guarantee. I'm realizing our form isn't super transfer friendly because we ask if you're in your final year of high school. So maybe we need to make a quick update to that. We don't tend, because of the way the timeline works, it just tends to not be a great fit for transfer students with where they're at in the process, but we would be happy to do that sort of assessment for a transfer student if they were so inclined.
Yeah. Just the question alone makes me think, wow, we do need to think about that at Wooster because right now it is not transfer friendly and we don't encourage students to complete it as transfer prospective students. So no, currently the early aid estimator isn't available to transfer students, but please know we have a transfer coordinator that works with folks very personally. We work with our registrar to provide a an early look at preliminary transfer credit, but not financially. We currently don't do that, so it's a great suggestion to think about. All right, well, we have a few minutes left if anyone else has questions that they'd like to raise. Okay. It was really great to have you all together. I know we're probably all feeling a little Zoom fatigue, but I'll tell you what, it's fun to see your smiling faces, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your day or evening to learn a little bit more about the early estimates that we provide to families and a little bit about our institutions. Adam, I wish I was in California, or I'm sorry, Washington with you. You're from California originally. I keep forgetting that, but I wish I had a little bit more daylight here. It's pretty dark, although it's about 75 degrees right now in Ohio.
Yeah,
so
well,
there you go.
Yeah, we just had our first frost. I wish I was in California too. My folks are down there, and it's 75 and sunny on the beach down there. So yeah, that is one of the downsides of COVID. Is it's been a while since I got my annual pilgrimage back home. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Well, hey everyone, take care of yourselves. Please stay safe. Good luck with this challenging year, and we are here should you have any additional questions. So thanks again.
Thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.